Hello. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, which for me in the Yarra Ranges is that of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and indeed extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that are here with us today. My name is Michele Acuto. I'm Director of the Connected Cities Lab and Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning at the University of Melbourne. And along with the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia and the Banksy Foundation, I would like to welcome you to the Sustainable Development Goals, Climate Change and Cities Symposium. Joining us today is Commissioner Penny Abeywardena, who leads New York City's Mayor's Office for International Affairs, who will be discussing with us the SDGs and cities. Penny leads New York City's global platform for promoting its goals for a more just society, showcasing the diversity of New Yorkers and sharing policies and best practices with the world. Her agency serves perhaps the largest diplomatic corps in the world and includes strategic partnerships and programming aimed at reaffirming New York City's leadership on global issues. Prior to this, Penny was Director of Girls and Women Integration at the Clinton Global Initiative, a French-American Foundation Young Leader, a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and co-chairs the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Cities and Urbanization. You will have a chance to join a live Q&A with Penny, along with Director General Qingyu Yao of the City of New Taipei, Tony Pipa, a Senior Fellow from Brookings Institution, and Roger Swinburne, an Associate Principal at ARP, at the symposium on Thursday, the 1st of October. Until then, we thank you for joining us today and welcome Penny Abeywardena. Penny, take it away.
Hi, my name is Penny Abeywardena, New York City's Commissioner for International Affairs. It is a privilege to join you today for this keynote on SDG 11. We have all heard the statistics that 2/3 of the world's population will be living in cities by 2030, and as a result, the role of cities is changing. And this is mostly by necessity. More and more, we are seeing national leaders, both here in the US and around the world, abdicate their responsibilities to address critical global challenges. Here in New York City, the de Blasio administration has been focused on city diplomacy and leadership since day one. We understood all too quickly that we had a national leader who, among other absurdities, has dismissed global warming as a hoax. And so we recognized that as the nation's largest city, we had to step up and lead the way on many of the challenges of our time. Take global warming, for example. Within 24 hours of Trump announcing his intent to withdraw the US from the landmark Paris Agreement, Mayor de Blasio signed an executive order committing New York City to the goals and principles of the agreement and have worked with mayors across the nation to do the same. The mayor was responding to an urgency we all felt as New Yorkers. A few years earlier, our city experienced climate change firsthand. Superstorm Sandy tore through our city on October 29, 2012, killing 44 people, displacing thousands of residents, and causing $19 billion in damage. We understood then that we needed a city that was more resilient, more sustainable, and more equitable, and we knew we were not alone. In the weeks and months following that executive order, New York City worked with the U.S. Conference of Mayors to coordinate additional support, which has resulted in the campaign, We Are Still In. This movement now has a membership of 3,850 mayors, governors, tribal leaders, businesses, and college presidents that represent some 158 million people across all 50 states. In fact, according to a 2019 report by the America's Pledge Initiative, which tracks climate action by subnational actors, policies adopted by this U.S. coalition could reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions up to 37% below 2005 levels by 2030. I wish I could say that our national leaders have since stepped up to help Americans in their greatest time of need, but the void of leadership has increased as we here in the U.S. are battling COVID-19. This pandemic has altered all of our lives. As nations around the world seek ways to navigate the effects of COVID-19 and chart a more equitable path for the future, New York City knows that the Sustainable Development Goals are more critical than ever. As you all may know, until very recently, New York City was the epicenter of the pandemic in the US. By early April, at its height, our city averaged more than 5,000 positive cases and nearly 600 deaths per day. Our hospitals were at capacity, we didn't have enough personal protective equipment, and we were running out of ventilators. So local leaders had to quickly mobilize and fend for ourselves. Our city collaborated with private labs to expand testing capacity. We worked with local manufacturers to make our own ventilators and PPEs, and we even set up hospital beds in parks to increase hospital bed capacity. As a city, we sheltered in place, implemented facial coverings requirements, and encouraged social distancing. And now, months later, our vigilance is paying off. We are in phase 4, and our indicators look extraordinary, but we also know that we cannot grow complacent at all. And so we are reopening cautiously, and we are following the science. We have now been in phase 4 since July 20th. Usually this phase 4 usually includes indoor dining. However, in looking at the data and seeing spikes happening in different parts of the country that allowed indoor dining, we changed course, delayed this action, and there's no indoor dining or entertainment in New York City currently. Instead, we closed off traffic to more streets to allow restaurants to offer more outdoor dining. This is just one example of how we're following the science to ensure that we're protecting all New Yorkers. We have the opportunity here to build a new normal, and at front of mind is the persistent healthcare, education, and socioeconomic inequalities that the pandemic has brought to the forefront. Our city immediately worked to help overcome some of these disparities by providing free laptops and tablets for students all over our 5 boroughs so they can take part in online learning, launching an aggressive test and trace program in our communities of color, which are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And very early on, we opened more than 400 food hubs where any New Yorker could get up to 3 free grab-and-go meals a day. The mayor even appointed a food czar so that we could prioritize that nobody went hungry in our crisis. The mayor also created task forces that encompass every sector of our city to help tackle concerns and find innovative solutions as we start to rebuild and reopen and, quite honestly, reset. One of the most important ones among them is the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity, of which I am a proud member. We are working to ensure that our city's response to this crisis leaves absolutely no one behind. The task force, chaired by First Lady Chirlane McCray, has worked with the Mayor's Fund to advance New York City to raise millions of dollars to support equitable relief for the communities hardest hit by the pandemic. To help our immigrant communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, the Mayor's Fund helped create the Immigrant Emergency Relief Program. The program works with community-based organizations to provide direct one-time emergency relief payments to up to 20,000 immigrant New York City families hardest hit financially by the crisis. The fund also partnered with the Mayor's Office to end domestic and gender-based violence and a nonprofit called Sanctuary for Families to launch a pilot program to deliver microgrants to survivors. Even as New York City works to navigate the challenges of the pandemic, a social movement here in the U.S. grows. The death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota, opened up a raw wound that has festered in this country for 400 years. The message of the Black Lives Matter movement is clear. We need change, and we need it now. The administration believes in the power of the grassroots and is committed to tackling inequality head on. Together with the City Council, the Mayor is enacting a series of new policies, including faster inquiries and discipline of police officers in incidents involving substantial bodily injury, more transparent discipline that requires the NYPD to publish information on all trial decisions or settlements reached, and a new body camera policy that requires all video and audio footage to be released within 30 days in specific circumstances. The city has committed to shifting funding from the NYPD to youth services and social service programs so that we can really address some of the root inequalities in our city. Our work to bring more equity and heal the wounds of the past is far from over. And so the Racial Inclusion and Equity Task Force continues to work on additional policy recommendations on how to bridge the divide between police and community. As you can see, the administration is striving to listen to the voice of the people and act on it. And as we move forward, the city will lean on the foundation of progressive policies we have adopted over the many years to help us rebuild. Policies like paid sick leave and free universal early childhood education. We also know that fighting the climate crisis has been at the heart of our recovery planning, because climate change is full stop a threat multiplier. This administration has included climate and environmental justice as a key component of our recently announced COVID-19 Fair Recovery for All plan. This work builds on the administration's efforts to make our city more resilient in the face of climate change. In fact, the lessons learned from Superstorm Sandy helped inform our city's sustainable development plan called One NYC, which we released in April 2015. Not only are we now redoubling our sustainability and resiliency efforts, we're doing so through a strong equity lens so we can build back not just stronger and better, but fairer. One NYC 2015 built on prior long-term sustainability plans by adding initiatives to tackle economic and environmental challenges. The plan set ambitious goals, including lifting 800,000 people out of poverty by 2025, sending zero waste to landfills by 2030, and eliminating long-term displacement from homes and jobs after shock events, all by 2050. And as an administration, we wanted to go further. So we launched the New York City Green New Deal plan last year to tackle the multitude of pressing societal challenges. The Green New Deal includes a series of laws and actions to combat global warming on all fronts and ensure a nearly 30% additional reduction in emissions by 2030. Now, for the last 6 years here at the Mayor's Office for International Affairs, we have been working to connect local initiatives to global efforts. We work with global partners to help accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals. We recognize that the global goals, which take on the inequities in our society, are crucial to building a more fair society as we move forward. In fact, after the member states ratified the 17 SDGs, my office mapped the global goals to our city's One NYC development agenda, and we had synergies in all, so we created this platform called Global Vision Urban Action. We wanted to ensure that cities and states around the world could exchange best practices as we implemented the SDGs locally. We also brought UN diplomats, New York City agency experts, and civil society partners into our local communities so that they could see firsthand how New York City was implementing the global goals in our neighborhoods. These exchanges became a way for our city to both showcase what we do well, but also to learn from the wealth of international experience that we have here in New York City within the largest diplomatic corps. I will also give you one exciting example. In spring of 2018, we took a delegation of international experts on a sludge vessel tour to show how the New York City Department of Environmental Protection treats wastewater and provides more than 1 billion gallons of fresh water for 8.5 million New Yorkers every day. At International Affairs, we wanted to take our efforts to the next step. We proposed the idea of creating the voluntary local review so that as an American city, we could show our leadership on the SDGs. It is modeled after the voluntary national review by which member states do the same at the UN. And given the track record of abdicating responsibility, we knew that our national government was unlikely to submit one of these reports. We were very pleased to receive feedback from the UN Secretary General and other senior UN officials, as well as local society groups that supported this voluntary local review. So in July 2018, New York City presented the first ever VLR to the UN. And it is so important to note here that this was never an effort to undermine or usurp member state sovereignty. We have appreciated the support and excitement from member states over the past 2 years. We view the voluntary local review as an opportunity for local governments to flex their leadership, to exchange best practices. This is not a time just to figure out what's new, but to showcase what is proven so that we can accelerate the impact in our communities. And that's the opportunity that using the SDGs as a common framework and language provide us. And one of the ways we are accelerating impact is by focusing on the youth. We launched a program called New York City Junior Ambassadors to enable 12 to 13-year-olds throughout our 5 boroughs to actively get involved not only with the UN, but with the global goals and the movements around them around the world. It teaches our youth to view themselves as global citizens, but most importantly, to take the SDG framework and take action in their community. We just wrapped up our 5th year of programming just last month, and even though we had to shift our UN tours and ambassador visits online, it was inspiring to see our young New Yorkers get excited and get active on issues like gender equity and climate change. And quite honestly, nothing brings global to local quite like seeing our young people be activated in our communities. As cities, I believe we need to harness our collective power to advocate and agitate for change, and that belief was one of the driving forces behind our decision to launch the New York City Declaration on the voluntary local review. It started with 24 signatories, and I'm proud to say right now that New York City, and the VLR rather, has become a movement. We now have more than 200 cities and states who have committed to sharing ideas and using the SDGs to accelerate impact in their communities. And the declaration is very important because it allows all of the cities and participants to activate where they are able to. So the first commitment is to identify the existing strategies, programs, and data that align with the SDGs. And then the next part of the commitment is to engage stakeholders. It is so important that everybody within the city and community are able to use the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, commitment number 3 in the declaration is that at some point they will submit their voluntary local review to the UN. The declaration emphasizes using existing resources to undertake the VLR process, and we wanted to keep the barrier for entry low. That was intentional. At the end of the day, we wanted to make the VLR process meaningful so that each city engages it within their own time, their own resources, and their own policy process. We see the voluntary local review process as an opportunity for subnational voices to take part in global conversations, and it is a tool that cities can use to identify ways to improve their service delivery in benefit of their community. Let me give you one example. One of our signatories is Freetown, Sierra Leone. Mayor Yvonne Aki-Sawyer has mapped the priorities of her development agenda, transform Freetown to the SDGs to help tackle issues of climate change. One such initiative, a flood mitigation plan, has been especially successful. By adopting the concept of community engagement, she was able to have community members map flood flashpoints that help local engineers find and unblock catchment points citywide. And during the rainy season, for the first time in 5 years, there were no floods in Freetown. Helsinki, Finland was the first city to sign on to the declaration. To initiate its VLR process, the city organized a research group to evaluate the city's strategy and make comparisons to the SDGs. In doing this, the city was able to identify its library system and primary school system as areas for concrete implementation of the global goals. It is really this exciting exchange of ideas that is at the heart of this VLR movement. This is the power of using the global goals as a common language and of using the voluntary local review to help activate and empower subnational governments. As you can well imagine, the work to create more equitable societies has taken on a greater urgency in this time of COVID-19, and we are all in this fight together for a better future. And so today I'm calling on you to join us in this movement. If you want to accelerate progress using the SDGs as a common language and framework to connect, please join us now. The road to recovery will be a long one for all of us, but as a city, as a nation, as a global community, we are strong and we are resilient. Thank you to all of you for your commitment to the SDGs. We can and will build a better future for all, and our new normal is going to be one in which the SDGs are realized. Thank you.